welcome to the supply chain, upstream, midstream, and recycling session. Thanks for joining in today. Before we get started, just wanted to introduce myself and also my co-author, Dev. So I'm Maithri Venkat, and I'm the program director for the Women in Batteries at Volta Foundation. And I also manage the battery cell engineering team at Lucid Motors. Dev, did you want to go ahead?
Sure. Yeah. Hi, everyone. My name is Kannan. I'm a research scientist at UL Research Institutes. I'm based in Houston, Texas. Yeah, I'm one of the co-authors in the recycling and second life battery section.
Perfect. Let me just start sharing my screen. Is everyone able to see my full screen? Perfect. Yeah, so for those who are trickling in, welcome to the supply chain, upstream, midstream, and recycling session. So we'll start our session with the foundational layer of the battery ecosystem, the upstream and midstream raw material markets. As you can see from the summary on this slide, the market in 2025 was a complex picture. So let's break down the major materials, and we'll start with lithium. So in case of lithium, while the investor sentiment remains weak, we've actually seen a price resurgence. And why is that? It's because it's being driven by massive procurement waves, particularly from the battery energy storage system sector, coupled with policy shifts like changes to China's export rebates. However, the supply curtailments still haven't fully brought the market back to balance. In case of graphite, we see that it's heavily dictated by China's market activity. The extreme concentration of supply chains in China, coupled with recent export controls, is the single biggest geopolitical risk that we will face on the material side. We do see that the diversification efforts are underway, but to be honest, the pace is simply too slow relative to the expected demand growth. So next, we have the scarcity markets. We see that cobalt is seeing its global supply severely being restricted by the tightening of export controls in the DRC. So this is forcing a lot of refiners outside the region to actively seek alternatives or even consider reducing their operating costs. So manganese also presents like a similar, if less acute strategic challenge. So the processing capacity outside of China is very limited, and this makes it a key choke point for midstream resilience. So finally, we have our outlier, nickel. So unlike the others, the nickel market is actually in a current state of oversupply. So this is largely due to the sheer volume that's coming in from the Indonesian and also Chinese producer. So crucially, the demand for nickel in batteries have been underperforming our initial projections because we do see that there's a market shift towards aggressive. Basically, there's an aggressive shift towards less expensive, lower energy density LFP chemistries. And this dynamic is a major factor shaping the future pricing. So now we go to our next slide. So we look at how these market forces are translated into prices in 2025. So one of the major takeaway from last year is that the price movements were not fundamentally driven by long-term supply-demand dynamics. Instead, they were actually caused by a lot of short-term distortions, things like rapid inventory swings, sudden procurement waves. So policy decisions, as we have noted here, are actually the new wild card that can tighten any market overnight. So in case of lithium, the price surge in China was a knee-jerk reaction. So it was a mix of rapidly depleting inventories and an increase in downstream LFP production. All this amplified by procurement from the battery energy storage systems value chain. So for cobalt, the uncertainty around the DRC's proposed export ban was enough to tighten the availability and this pushed the price even higher. And this is even before full enforcement went through. So in case of nickel, it's a fascinating case, like I mentioned in my previous slide also. So despite its feedstock costs actually rising, the market was simultaneously flooded with a lot of non-battery nickel cathodes, and the prices kind of defied a lot of the expectations and continuing to remain on the bearish trend. So the underlying news here, so the good news for all the battery manufacturers is this. So despite recent fluctuations, material prices still remain at historically low levels. And basically, this is what continues to support the overall low battery production costs. So our next slide, this kind of takes us to the critical regional spotlight, which is Africa. So the key takeaway here is that policy initiatives across the African continent, they are aiming for something far more significant than simply extracting raw minerals. So the goal here is a strategic shift to transition nations from just being exporters of mineral ore to basically establishing them in terms of domestic industrialization within the battery value chain. So we see that these new policies are explicitly designed to do two things. One, attract foreign investment, and two, build out the midstream. So that is in terms of processing, manufacturing, and also like technological capacity. So this is how value add will be localized, ensuring a sustained and prominent role for Africa in the global market. So that being said, I hope we can turn our attention to midstream. So the title of this slide kind of says it all. So building regional midstream supply chains in Europe and North America remains a challenge. So the core issue we are facing here is a structural deficit in the midstream. Specifically, we are not producing enough precursor and cathode active materials domestically. So, what does this mean in practice? So, it means that our downstream CAM providers are heavily reliant on imports. And we're still continuing to see a dependence on Asian supply chains with a heavy reliance, of course, on China. So, for example, in 2025, we see that many South American CAM operations that were supplying to the US market still used PCAM imported from China. So, why is this deficit so persistent? Let's just look at the economics here. The midstream suffers from notoriously tight margins and shorter contract lengths. So, this translates to limited future visibility and basically a reduced incentive for investment, especially when compared to the more lucrative downstream and value add areas of the supply chain. So, if our goal here is to onshore a complete supply chain and secure a competitive, low cost EV market, uh, especially without this dependence, then addressing and closing this midstream deficit must be a priority. So, with that, I handed it over to my co author, Dave,
Okay.
to cover the recycling section.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, Maithri. I mean, we can discuss after all the slides are covered, or we can also have in between sessions to discuss as well. So if if everyone is ready, I can share the slide deck that I want to present and also discuss it as well. Just one second. Okay. Okay. Let me go it. Okay, so what I wanted to cover is the pathways, the recycling and the second life section actually. So one of the things that originally when we discussed during the preparation of this report with other collaborators and everyone in the area as well is when is it decided whether to do the recycling or the reuse purpose before recycling? That is considered to be the second life application, and what kind of factors that can be added as part of the end of life stages. Like when is it appropriate to take the battery that is being used in a specific application, most probably like an electric vehicle, and then use it for some second life application, and then move on to some kind of recycling purpose, like any kind of recycling. So there are like different methods of recycling as well. So in the traditional life cycle, so there are some things like an used EV or which has reached the end of life, the batteries have reached end of life, directly go to recycling purpose. But there are like some instances where we can extract specific cells or packs, like modules or packs of the batteries, and then do the disassembly process, and then take individual cells, do some primary testing to understand like what is the state of health of the cell, what is the state of charge, what is the capacity retention of the cell, and then move on to the next stage of the process, which is like, can we put together these cells which has sufficient amount of energy and can last, let's say, few hundred cycles more for a specific application. So that is one way of doing it. And the other aspect is take the module of the EV as a whole and use it as a direct secondary second life application, which in this case could be some kind of an energy storage system, some backup source like a UPS system for some communication devices, some smaller spaces where it can be used as an auxiliary backup system in case of any power outage or power surge or things like that that can happen. So in that aspect, either any of the cases, we would have to do the validation, we would have to do the post testing after it has been extracted from an electric vehicle, and then find out how long or estimate how long it can last more, or how many cycles of it can we use it for, and what kind of applications we can target it to. So that process needs to happen. And then once even that is exhausted, let's say it reaches 70% of the capacity retention, and then move on to the next stage, which would be the recycling. In the recycling, so there are like multiple like hydro metallurgy recycling, pyro metallurgy. So there are like different process of recycling as well. So in the chart here, which is published in like a manuscript, research manuscript, you can see like a template for the traditional battery life cycle and optimizing the reuse and the recycling pathway for the radial EV batteries, and then what is the beneficial life cycle of it. And then on the right side, we can see the what would be the typical lifespan of the battery pack or a battery module from an electric vehicle throughout its life cycle if it is not fully exhausted or used in an electric car. So as you can see, like the initial ages, the amount of things that will be available for either recycling or even for reuse purposes, it's low. But as the battery gets aged or the battery pack gets aged, we'll get more and more towards the mid, like around like 15-year mark or 17-year mark. And then most of the batteries will go into the recycling or available for recycling at the 25-year mark, like sorry, 23 or after 20 years mark, basically. And then you can use that for basically like recycling, or that's the only use case that it can be used for. That is the kind of the proposed or even ambitious goal in terms of what to do with the battery pack that are currently being produced and being used in an electric vehicle. So then I wanted to cover briefly on the policies from different countries that it talks about what is the end of life management policies and also the recycling goals in terms of what it is there for the country, what it is there for the industries or the companies that can use the batteries, and what type of requirements are there for recycling. So there are majorly there are like three places where you can see like a lot of updated rules and regulations. One is China, and the one is India, and then the European Union. So there are like new policies and regulations and measures that have been put in place. Different countries have different comprehensive rules and regulations, and in terms of agreement that needs to happen, and the goals that the countries have set to recycling. So basically, one of the recent one is the target for China would be more like, can we do at least 60% of the batteries that are being produced or have reached end of life will be going through the recycling process. India also has like a lot of stricter standards and rules in terms of new bans or which location to be identified where the batteries can be recycled, what is the alternative, or what kind of things that can be done with the materials after the recycling of the batteries as well. And the European Union has also proposed like new rules and the targets for recycling of the batteries being used, and also the battery passport requirements that tracks the life cycle of the battery that is being used and produced. India also recently about like launched like the Aadhaar number for the battery pack, similar to the battery passport, but it also tracks the same way that where the battery is produced, the source of the materials, and through the end of life. It hasn't been like fully implemented as far as I understand right now, but there are proposals to keep track of from the material level to the pack level. What is the whole life cycle of the battery, and then when it can be used or when it can be extracted for recycling. And even for recycling, you have like specific uh, requirements that needs to go through. In the US as well, you have the California has a separate rule that was passed in before 2023, and then there is like a New Jersey Electric and the Hybrid Vehicle Battery Management Act that is also passed in 2024. So there are like things that are getting implemented for the already existing electric vehicle batteries mainly, and also the energy storage batteries as well. And so, in terms of the recycled content, I'll just quickly go over it. Basically, the new battery regulation from 2023 from the European Union, like as you can see, like the main materials are like cobalt, lead, lithium, nickel, and then the 2031, basically like the recycled content standard is 16% of the material should be used for cobalt, and the lead is around 85%, and the lithium and nickel are 6% each. And the 2036, it has kind of increased, mostly double for like the lithium and nickel as well, from the European Union thing. And then the India battery management rules for reused content or recycled content standards for the portable and the electric vehicle. The target has been set to increase year over year. Maximum beyond 2030, the 20% target has been fixed. And in terms of the automotive and the industrial sector, you have the 2024-2025 requirement is 35% of the material, and then beyond 2027 the goal is to use like 40% of the material. And so the lack of battery data or the life cycle of the data that is being used in a specific application matters a lot, and there are new standards or new rules and regulations to keep track of it, at least from the future point of view. At least from now on, keep track of all of them before the battery gets either used or getting it recycled. So, and then the recycling capacity, and you can see the most amount of batteries getting recycled is China. China has more than half the world's battery production, scrap, everything, and also they also lead in the recycling aspect. So you can see in terms of metric tons, China alone is like more than close to 1.5 million tons, and then the rest of the world is like very tiny. And then North America, there is like a few million. Some percentage of material. And then in terms of the uh, basically pre-processing capacity, the material recovery, everything is much higher in China when compared to the rest of the country. But China is also one of the largest battery producing country as well, so which is not a surprise. And then so there are the recycling process itself has some limitations in terms of like how much of the material can be recycled and reused more efficiently, and there are different methodologies, and is it making it cost effective is also a challenge right now. but the target has been set so that we don't want to ideally keep producing new materials to be used in the batteries. And the next one I want to talk about is the recycling profitability is in the material prices. So basically, in terms of the recovered material value for the NMC 811 and the LFP, the average, you can see the nickel and the lithium. Lithium is extracted more, close to like $30 per kilowatt hour. And then there is second one is nickel, and then comes cobalt and copper, and then aluminum is like a very tiny fraction of it. And then when it comes to LFP, lithium is also like there also lithium is extracted more. So it's basically like the value of lithium from the recovered material is high, and most of the batteries currently being used have been in the US at least is NCA and NMC type chemistries, and then the future growth is to predominantly switch over to like LFP batteries, which is primary use for any kind of heavy vehicle application like semi trucks and all those kind of things. And even for EVs, the switch has been happening from this nickel-based chemistries to nickel-rich chemistries to LFP. And then recycling profits for LFP is lower, and then it is kind of resulting in a loss for the recycler. So as you can see for the August and the 2015-2024 average, the LFP recycling cost is much lower when it compares to the NMC chemistry. Yeah. And then the next one I wanted to go to is the second life application. So second life, there are a lot of challenges in using the batteries for second life application. The main use case for using an individual cell is like disassembly part, and then testing the batteries individually, then making sure that it can be put together safely into another battery module or like a battery pack for a specific application. That has been a significant challenge. And as you might all be familiar with, like in a battery module, when it is being used, there is the possibility that the cells individually age differently. So identifying specific cells that can go for reuse purposes, selecting them, it's a lot of effort and a lot of work. So in terms of general workflow, you can see like the battery pack incoming assessment. So you just assess the whole battery altogether, and then you have to do the disassembly part of it. And the another challenge is how the battery module or the pack is put together. Sometimes there are like a lot of complicated welds, and you have all the epoxy, like the potting material and everything included as part of the battery module, which is in a use case it is much safer. But the manufacturer themselves, if it is not targeted towards recycling in the future, then the current goal is to make the battery module much safer. So those additional materials that gets added, it is difficult to disassemble them, remove them, and remove the individual components of the battery pack, then take the individual cells out, and then do the evaluation of those cells, making sure they are safe. And then we have to do the electrochemical safety performance evaluation. Then you go to the mechanical integrity of the cell itself. Some cells are design specific, some can be damaged, some can have some defects during the removal process itself. Then having information regarding the use case or how the life of the cell has aged, what kind of temperature conditions it has gone through will be really helpful. But it is very difficult to get that data for companies that are trying to make this reuse case or the second life application. And then grouping the cells of similar age and then making it as a viable product, then using it for a second life application, then going for recycling. After recycling, then we are disposing the other material. So there is like a lot of individual steps that needs to happen, even for the second life application. So which makes it really currently like not very cost efficient because of the additional work that is involved. And then there are companies that are working on it to make sure and will somehow like find a way to at least use some part of the battery module for a second life application. And in some cases it can just be used as a like an auxiliary, like a power source or a backup power for even like smaller computers or some kind of like an application that doesn't compromise the safety of the battery that is being used for second life applications. And the last one is the current application that it can be targeted to. So let's say there are some EV battery modules in the packs which can be directly used for the energy storage system, or some kind of a charging station that it can be used for any electric vehicle charging, which needs like a slower charging rate, and also some kind of the telecom backup power in case any issues arise there, and also some kind of batteries can be used specifically for other electric e-mobility applications. Like let's say e-bike is an application or e-scooter is an application which can be used for like a few years before it gets recycled actually. And then so currently like behind the meter, so you can see there were applications: renewable integration, energy arbitrage, peak load shaving, backup power, small mobility vehicles, EV charging, demand response, and microgrid. So these are some of the things that it can be used for. And currently, this is not like a comprehensive list. So people are working to identify this second life application later, like recycling. So the pack level ones, there are companies like Retool, Smartwell, Element. They're all working on it. And then the module one is again Retool and Relion. And the cell level, there are like Volta, repurpose energy, and currents. So these are all trying to take the battery from the EV and then use it for second life applications. So second life market is also growing, and you can see like there are specific US players that are working on it, and then there are like South African. There's also companies that are working on it, and larger companies that are also already implementing to do the second life usage. So LG has implemented some of the BESS with the used cells, and then we have like DNV trying to develop like the European standards. So then the Volkswagen, Audi, all of them are working on this second life uh, application related project. India has like a few companies that are also targeting for second life usage, and then Australia. Every country, or every even European Union, has a lot of countries working on identifying batteries and using it for second life applications specifically. And then yeah, I mean, I will basically like go over it, and we can have further discussion on specific topics and how effectively, and if there are like people in the audience can provide like what they have come across, that will also be like helpful in order to understand what's the current market and what's the future growth looks like for both recycling and second life. And there are specific standards that any battery needs to go through before any application that needs to happen. So some of the standards include like the UL standards, which are mainly the 9540, 1973, 1974, and the NFP and IFC standards are also there for evaluating the batteries specifically. But there hasn't been a stricter enforcement on standards for second life application, but it is up to the user as well as the second life use case like manufacturer that needs to make sure that these batteries are safe and provide like sufficient or keep track of sufficient information, and make sure that nothing goes wrong when it is being used in an application that is being targeted. More than likely, it will be for any like a low energy application. Uh, so it should be relatively safe, but it still needs to go through a lot of validation and verification process. And in terms of uh, regulations, so many countries, European Union, China, India, US, like are proposing rules for recycling, and mainly targeting for recycling and reuse of the material from the recycled material. How much of the material can be added to the batteries to make use of the material and reduce the total cost, but not specifically focusing on repurposing or like second life applications. Yeah. So that will be the end of the slide, and I will like open up for discussions and questions to answer. Yeah. Thank you, everyone.
Shall we move on to China, Jerry?
Sure, sure. Let me share my screen. Um, next, let me show. One moment. Hi everyone, can you see my screen?
Yes, I can see it. Yeah.
Cool. Just for your information, Linda is having a meeting right now, so she won't be joining. I'll be hosting the China section, and she wanted to say hi. Cool. Hi everyone, I'm Jerry. I run a data website on newergyterminal.org where you can play around with the battery data. And this year I'm the author of China sections, and today we're very excited to present the China section of the report. It is a brand new section and one that had been a long time coming. At the end of the presentation, we hope you have a better understanding of China's development over the past 20 years and where it stands today. We'll be diving into key historical moments in China's rise to leadership in the battery industry, policy, talent, and ecosystem maturities, capital, supply chain, and finally, technology. First, go with the history. 25 years ago, China was nobody in batteries. Japan dominates, and Korea was rising, while China was playing the catch-up with reverse engineering nickel cadmium cells. But the Chinese government made battery development a strategic national priority with a 10th five-year plan in 2000. In 2001, China's A63 program outlined the national electric vehicle technology roadmap known as the three vertical and three horizontals, with the three vertical referring to fuel cell, hybrid, and electric vehicles, and the three horizontal referring to multi-energy powertrain systems, electric drive models, and finally traction batteries. Some of the major companies we know today were formed during this time, like ATL, and which eventually now we have CATL, BYD, and Eve Energy, and also Goshins. From 2006 to 2010, it was focused on transitioning cells from R&D into real world for electric vehicles. In 2007, the new energy vehicle production access management rules marked the first formal standardization of China's NEVs industry market. In 2009, the 10 cities 1,000 vehicles program was launched with a goal of for 10 cities to add over 1,000 new electric vehicles annually over 3 years, largely focused on public fleets like buses and taxis. The program quickly expanded to incorporate 25 cities by 2011, and the central government provided large subsidies for this pilot program that participating cities were required to match. Around the same time, the 1,000 Talents Plan recruited top scientific and technological expertise from around the world. A symbolic moment here is the 2008 Beijing Olympics, which showcased 500 domestically produced NEVs. Just next year, BYD debuts its first pure electric vehicles, the E6 models. Moving on to 2011 to 2015, it focused on the scale. The energy saving and new energy vehicle industry development plan is a target for 500,000 accumulated NEV sales by 2015 and an annual production capacity of 2 million units by 2020. Federal NEV subsidy program were extended with monetary incentives like one-on-one subsidy match and non-monetary incentives like getting free license plates with the purchase of an EV or vape tolls, which are highly attractive for densely populated major cities. In 2015, China released the Made in China 2025 master plan to upgrade industry and occupy highest part of the global production chain, setting the target of 70% self-sufficiency in the core battery materials and components by 2025. And here's a key industrial milestone in the period include, for example, in 2011, CATL sprung out of ATL to focus purely on power batteries. In 2013, following A123 system bankruptcy, Wanxiang Group acquired the company's patent, LFP cathode production asset, and research platform, enabling rapid entry into advanced LFP battery technology. And in 2014 and 2015, many new EV innovators entered the market like NIO, Xiaopeng, and Li Auto. In 2016, the government discovered widespread abuse of the NEV subsidies program, including forced reporting of production and sales volume, incomplete fake vehicles, so changes were made in 2017. commercial vehicle owner had to demonstrate that the car had driven at least 30,000 kilometers before subsidy granted. This is for commercial vehicles as non-private. In case for manufacturers, if they just made new vehicles and they just don't sell it and keep it for their own use and they still got a subsidy, this is an issue. And vehicles models were also required to meet technical standards on batteries, drive models, vehicle safeties, and energy efficiency to qualify for incentives. A dual credit policy was introduced, which meant that auto companies had to meet both corporate average fuel consumption and NEV credit requirement. Together, this reform reduced reliance on upfront subsidies and pushed the industry towards demand driven by real usage, performance, and regulatory compliance. And the notable events in this period include CATL became the world's largest EV battery manufacturer in 2017, Tesla's Gigafactory opening in Shanghai in 2018, and BYD's LFP blade cell launch in 2020. At the end of this period, Chinese firm has secured near monopolies on midterm processing, controlling 95% of the graphite and over 70% of the cathode precursors. Entering the recent years from 2021 to 2025, NEV penetration target was achieved ahead of schedule in 2021. From the policy perspective, energy storage became the next major application focus, and the government is doubling down on product qualities. China continues to have a stronghold on the supply chain, implementing export control for key components like graphite and expanding this control to additional areas like cathode processing, lithium extraction technology, and manufacturing equipment. As early EV batteries enter their retirement phase, government and industry are exploring standardized recycling models. At the same time, new application sectors like low-altitude aviation, robotics have emerged. China continues to lead in early pilots and large-scale deployment for new and upcoming chemistry like sodium iron and semi-solid state. And looking into the next 5 years, policy is focused on modernizing the power system, scaling advanced storage and grid flexibility, and accelerating the end-use electrification. Energy storage is expected to grow faster than EV batteries as renewable scales. Now let's move on to policy landscape. Key policy this year cover a wide range of topics, and almost every month in last year, there's something happened. And some key highlights include safety standards, recycling rules, and expanding export controls, and further NEV and EV expansions. We'll dive into some of the key items from last year in the subsequent slides. Let's go through some major trends in vehicle landscape and relevant policies. First of all, the NEV sales, the growth is still remarkable. In just the first 7 months of 2025, China's NEV sales reached 8.2 million with market penetration of 45%. What it means is that in China market, almost every other car sold is an NEV. But behind the growth are clear signs of market stress. The insurance industry had an average combined ratio that over 100% for new energy vehicles. In 2024, a combined ratio of over 100% reflects an underwriting loss. It means companies are paying out more in claims and expense than they're collecting in premiums. As for policies, the 2025 policies are shifting from scale to quality. Consumer-wise, early last year, policy focused on lowering ownership barriers through NEV insurance reform to stabilize consumer confidence. And then automakers and battery manufacturing-wise, they emphasize the move towards building standards for emerging technologies and curbing irrational price wars. Our first policy deep dive is China's anti-evolution campaign targeting overcapacity and margin pressure. If you haven't heard the word evolution, it describes an overall phenomenon in China. The best explanation I heard is if you are in a movie theater and the entire row before you stand up, then you have to stand up as well. Here's the battery world. Fierce price competition has eroded China's producers' profitability. Prices are below sustainable cost, destroying market value. This anti-involution policy focused on quality over quantity and phasing out low quality and uncompetitive producers. General sentiment is that the government would adopt a gradual and market-led approach to reining overcapacity. In April, China released one of the most stringent battery safety standards, as you might heard, the GB 38031 2025. It is an update to the previous 2020 version and will be effective in 2026 this year. Some notable changes include requiring a short circuit test after 300 cycles of fast charge at cell level and alarm signals within 5 minutes of thermal runaway at the pack level. If the battery failed to meet this standard, then it's not allowed to be installed in any vehicles. Any electric vehicles currently equipped with these batteries that's still on the market will be put out from the market. Lastly, China continues to expand its export control to maintain strategic advantage. In 2025, China started to restrict export of material production techniques such as for lithium extraction and LFP and lithium manganese iron phosphate cathode materials manufacturing processes. China also released export control to limit export of lithium-ion batteries with over 300 watts per kilogram energy density. However, these measures were suspended for 1 year given the latest US and China trade deals last October. We shall see what awaits us this October. A quick wrap on the policy section for this year. We saw the push toward anti-involution, high quality cells and high battery safety standards, and direction towards policy to retain industry know how to maintain its leading position. Okay, now let's move on to talent and ecosystem maturities. First of all, the ecosystem, and actually this map, this pin should be on central China, which is around the corner of the Hubei, Hunan and Jiangxi province. And how to read this map? So this map illustrates the geographical evolution and strategic shift of China's battery industry. The darker the red, the more robust and mature the ecosystem. The darkest area is definitely the Guangdong province and Jiangsu province. Originally, China's battery industry was concentrated in these two areas. And these two regions today still remain core pillars and innovation hubs. Over the past 5 years, however, the industry has expanded to more inland regions, particularly in central and southwest China. Starting with central China, which functioned as a resource to industry bridge. Yichun, Jiangxi is known as the lithium capital of Asia here. And we have Hunan Yunnan is a top-tier LFP cathode material producer here. And we have Eve Energy's battery manufacturing in Hubei. And finally, used battery will be recycled by Brown in Yichang and Gem in Jinmen. Together, this forms a relatively complete regional loop from resource to manufacturing and recycling. And then moving on to southwest China, in Sichuan particularly, this region has become a green energy and mineral hotspot. Sichuan is not only rich in mineral resources, it is geographically close to northwest China, where salt lakes provide important lithium resource, but it also benefits from strong local government support. To date, the regional layout is relatively clear. We have Yibin focused on battery manufacturing. We have Suiling on components. And we have Chengdu, Meishan, and Northwest Sichuan jointly developed the broader ecosystem. Many companies double down on Sichuan, spanning the entire value chain from upstream materials to downstream vehicles and even battery recycling. As a result, the province has formed a complete battery supply chain life cycle. Examples include Tianqi Lithium, Sichuan Yunnan, Shanshan, Tinci, CATL, and Eve Energy. China also has a robust battery ecosystem built on strong collaboration between industry, academias, and research institutions. Over the past 36 years, industry association and socialization have played a critical role in bridging government policy and industrial development in China's battery sector. To name a few, in terms of policy advocacies and standard setting, it's led by national organizations such as CBIA and CIAPS. And to drive technology innovation, the National Innovation Center and the China Industrial Association of Power Source focus on R&D in advanced materials, and solid-state battery technology. There are also NGOs like CAM and CNESA. This is a very popular media in China, and they provide news and research, by the way. And there are also regional groups in Jiangsu and Guangdong to help foster the battery ecosystem. And moving on to capital, we'll talk about China's batteries investment journey and the financing system in 2025 figures. So building the battery empire requires massive capital investment. From an investment perspective, China has gone through 4 key phases: the technical exploration period from 1990s to 2005, and the policy-driven period from 2006 to 2015, and the high-speed growth period from 2016 to 2020, and where we are today with China's manufacturers taking the global lead in both production capacity and technological breakthroughs. Lithium-ion batteries has become one of the hottest investment track in China. Over the past decades, from 2016 to 2025, there have been 578 investment events, with total investment reached RMB 134 billion, approximately 19 billion US dollar. Series A finance remains dominant, followed by private equities and venture capital investment. In addition to traditional equity financing, innovative financial instrument has also emerged, including the battery asset ABS, financial leasing, and green finance. For example, CATL's Power Battery Toll Receipt ABS issued a RMB 1.5 billion with a coupon rate of 3.8%. Financial leasing is mainly used for equipment purchases and production line construction, while in green finance, the People's Bank of China, PBOC, provides a carbon reduction facilities with a relending rate of 1.75%. So far, we look at the investment events that already occurred. Now let's turn to look at public disclosed investment projects in 2025, which imply much larger capital commitment going forward. According to Gaogong Industrial Institute, a well-known industries research institute, based on public disclosed investment projects across the entire China lithium-ion battery value chain, 2025 hit a record high, with total investment exceeding RMB 820 billion RMB. Is around 110 to 115 billion US dollars, representing a year-on-year growth rate of over 74%. As for individual companies, they're taking different strategies. Under the massive effect, leading companies like CATL and BYD, they continue to accumulate advantages. CATL is securing raw material supply while expanding battery manufacturing into more provinces across China and overseas. BYD has adopted a vertically integrated model covering everything from battery to vehicles. It also operates overseas automobile manufacturing facilities, and just a few days ago, BYD announced plans to build its first overseas battery plant in Vietnam. For tier 2 companies, whose production capacity is much smaller than CATL and BYD, the focus is more on niche market, technology innovation, and long-term partnerships in order to avoid direct competition on production skills. For example, CALB is investing in high voltage fast charging technologies. If Energy is focusing on large-scale energy storage cells, and Gotion is pursuing long-term partnership with Volkswagen. Now let's move on to supply chain. We mainly talk about Castle since China focused more on LFP technology, closer battery automaker collaboration in the downstream, and the overcapacity issue that we're facing, which is pretty severe. First, let's take a look at China's battery supply chain in 2025. It is highly concentrated and increasingly integrated. Upstream minings remain heavily dependent on overseas lithium, cobalt, and nickel, but midstream refining is dominated by Chinese firm, giving China a structural advantage in processing. Tianqi, Ganfeng, and Yahua control over 75% of domestic lithium processing, while Huayou Cobalt holds more than 30% of the global cobalt refining capacity. The material segment is undergoing rapid consolidation and technological differentiation. LFP cathodes dominates domestic AVs and ESS demand, while ternary materials continue to lose share. Anode separators and electrolytes showing rise concentration, with leading players benefit from scale, cost, and high technical barriers. The cell and pack market is extremely concentrated. The top 10 players account for over 93% of the domestic share, and with CATL and BYD forming a stable duopoly exceeding 70%. Scale, capital intensity, and system integration are raising barriers to entry and widening the gap between leaders and followers. Electric vehicles and energy storage form the industry's second growth curve. Chinese companies leading global EV battery installation and ranked among the top energy storage cell suppliers, with CATL leading both segments. Growth is driven by cost efficiency, manufacturing skills, and supply chain integration. Finally, battery recycling is becoming a scaled and channel-driven circular economy. Concentration is rising as leading players integrate with manufacturers and secure feedstock, like Cheng and Brown lead in capacity and recovery efficiency with over 99% recovery rate for key metals, making recycling increasingly strategic for cost controls and resource security. Now let's move on to LFP. In the first half of 2025, LFP cathode account for 77% of the total shipment and over 94% in the ESS sector. LFP is one of the most globally competitive segments of battery value chain. The profit margin remains seen amid intensive price competition. The market follows a one superpower in many strong models, with Hunan leading by the wide margin, as you can see. And Chinese company dominates domestically and are actively expanding overseas production. On the technology side, fourth generation products are now mainstream, while fifth generation products are entering pilot production. Despite this, global capacity continued to pressure margin compared to battery and lithium producers. Most LFP producers are struggling to break even the leading firm with high utilization and technological advantages. Amid rapid demand growth, LFP capacity expansion resumed in the second half of 2024, led by Tier 1 producers and industrial giants, who can tolerate the lower profitability to capture market share. In response to China's anti-involution campaign, industry association launched LFP cost index, and leading producers have pushed for price increase in 2026 contracts. Ultimately, outcome depends on negotiation with battery customers who retain strong bargaining power. During the last quarter of 2025, the lithium price rallied. Several leading LFP producers suspended production line, pressuring the customers unwilling to accept lithium-linked price. By contrast, ternary cathode producers also face low utilization, but profitability remained higher as these batteries target high-end vehicles. With stagnant demand since 2023, many ternary producers have canceled planned projects and shifted focus to LFP productions. And we're only talking about LFP cathode in supply chain because LFP is like a different things in China compared to the rest of the world. Now let's take a look at the downstream. The battery automaker collaboration is intensifying with more joint venture emerging. This is a bright side compared to the overcapacity issues. An example includes CATL and BAIC, which is a joint venture between CATL, BAIC, and Xiaomi, and CATLB lead model last year. Other highlights include co-development and partnerships such as Gotions and Volkswagens, and vertically integration, for instance, fine drain supply, BYD and third-party OEMs, and Geely consolidating its battery operation under GL Tongxing in 2025. Before that, Geely has a very massive organizational structure. It has a lot of battery companies and also a lot of other companies. Now they're all under the same name, GL Tongxing, which is a good thing if you're tracking the battery data. But despite closer collaboration, severe overcapacity is still driving strategic divergence among manufacturers. I have a chart here. So this is, and the bar and the height of the bar is China's nominal battery production capacities, is what they claim they have. But it's not a real capacity because it's not fully utilized. But by looking at the chart, you can see China's nominal battery production capacity already exceeds both domestic and global shipment. As of 2025, domestic capacity already surpassed 3 trillion watt-hour, with over more under construction or planned. And intensifying competition is driving strategic divergence. Leading companies like CATL continue the ion expansion, while others delay or cancel EV battery projects and pivot toward ESS, consumer batteries, or next generation technologies such as sodium ion, solid state to put in Volta batteries. At the same time, Chinese battery companies are accelerating overseas manufacturing in APAC and Europe to localize productions to mitigate tax and trade risk. You can scroll back a few chapters in the Gigafactory section and the live report. Beyond overcapacity, another challenge in the Chinese companies are facing is the Trump 2.0 trade wars, and it's forcing rapid supply chain realignment and de-risking. Key development include like the new One Big Beautiful Bill rules and tax credit timeline. The updated 45X tax credit keeps 100% credit for batteries and solar components through 2029, but phasing out sharply from 2030, reaching zero by 2033. And there are tightened IRA localization requirement. Subsidy eligibility now requires escalating non-foreign entity of concern localization, with battery components threshold rising from 60% in 2026 to 85% by 2029, pushing manufacturers to decouple quickly from China's supply chains. And China's counter moves. Beijing leverage its upstream dominance, imposing export control on rare earths, graphite, and battery technology, creating bottlenecks for Western manufacturers. Finally, there are tariff and material price fluctuations. The trade war split the market. Overseas price carry a security premium due to tariff and restructuring cost, while domestic China price remain low, pressuring by excessive capacity. And the loss of the supply chain is, now we see the challenges. Internally, we have overcapacity and fierce competition, and externally, the trade wars. The Chinese companies are taking actions. This is a visual illustration of the global footprint of Chinese battery companies and their overseas strategies. We have Europe, which is powering the automotive heartland. And as you can see, CATL is building plants in Germany, Hungary, Spain, EV Energy in Hungary, CLB, and there should be Goshen in Slovakia. And as for Mid East and Africa, for information, Morocco is aiming to become the hub for battery components and EV batteries. And for North America, to navigate Trump 2.0 risk, company aims to maintain market access while minimizing political and regulatory exposure. For example, CATL uses technology licensing and service model with Ford in Michigan. And for Asia and South America, Chinese companies are securing the full value chain, such as CATL and its upstream material firms building full cycle plants in Indonesia. And the listed company acquiring land in South America, Salt Lake, for example, Tianqi. But as you might know from the news, Tianqi is having some trouble these days, and in Chile. Okay. I think we're running out of time, so I'll just quickly go through the technology innovation. So this is the innovation of CATL Chilling battery using cell-to-pack Gen 3 technology. It is used by Xiaomi SU7 models, and it is safer and more reliable than the past. And this is BYD and Xiaomi. For information, Xiaomi SU7 uses battery from 2 providers, CATL and BYD. So this is the BYD version. This is a structural innovation that integrates the battery pack directly into the vehicle's body and increase the structural rigidities and optimize space utilization. It is more compact. And there's also cell-to-body battery pack covered hybrid material process, achieving approximately 3 times more lightweight than metal structures while maintaining stiffness requirements. And there is composite current collector technology. It adopts a metal polymer metal sandwich structure and a design increase energy density and reduce short circuit risk. And also the thermoelectric separation and multi-layer insulation. This design had a few advantages, mostly in terms of safety, but also as for human labor, they reduce manual labor, lower failure rates, and enable smart management system, which is good for production. China is also the major pioneering players in eVTOLs and humanoid robots. We're waiting for us to see like semi-solid and solid energy, solid-state batteries to be installed in this kind of product. And I think we talked about this before. And to achieve higher energy density than LLP, and here's another options. And it is on the radar, and we see the large-scale market adoption from 2025 onward. And also in last year, China published the LMP national standard GB 46 512 2025 in October 2025, effectively this year in May. And moving on to sodium-ion batteries, this technology has progressed rapidly across research, industrial development, and early commercialization. And finally, semi-solid and all-solid-state batteries. Even though this is a very hot topic, but it's still in the pilot production phase. And we're seeing when it will be reaching mass production. To name a few OEMs who adopted solid-state technology, you can see SIAC and GAC, NEO, FAW, and BYD. And they have the start of production plan for this year and next year. Okay, cool. As a recap, the key highlight for 2025 in China include policy focus on battery safeties and market health. And despite challenges, China continues supply chain dominance and capital allocation trends, and finally the rapid technology innovation. And we hope you enjoy it. Thank you so much for joining the China section. And that's all for me.